Today's webinar is on Creo customization, and specifically we're going to focus on the Creo Object Toolkit Java API, which was introduced in Creo 3.0. The objective is to give you an overview of the Creo Object Toolkit Java functionality and how it fits into the overall Creo customization strategy. We're going to start with a quick introduction to myself and Boundary Systems. Then we're going to get into the bulk of the webinar and focus on an overview of existing Creo API toolkits and the new Object Toolkit Java API, and again, sort of how that fits in and why they've introduced some of these new APIs over the last few versions of the software. And then at the end, we will open it up for question and answer. Like I said, if you have questions throughout the presentation, you can enter them in the questions box in the GoToWebinar interface, and they'll stay there so that I can keep track of them. My name is Wade Morvek. I'm the Director of Engineering for Boundary Systems. I have been working with PTC products for 17 or so years now, working with ProEngineer, now Creo, as well as Windchill, and worked in terms of doing training classes, consulting, implementations, all of those types of things. So I'm familiar with a lot of the different PTC software, and I've worked with a lot of different companies and seen sort of how they use it and how they've implemented it. Boundary Systems is a PTC partner headquartered out of Cleveland, Ohio. We partner with not only PTC but also several other companies that offer sort of complementary solutions to sort of our core PTC Creo and PTC Windchill offerings. We specialize in product lifecycle management, data management, CAD design and consulting, and again have worked with a lot of different companies and a lot of different industries, and so we have a lot of experience that we can offer in terms of making suggestions and helping you figure out more efficient ways to do things potentially. These are some of our awards and accreditations. So we've been recognized for several years in a row as one of the fastest growing private companies, both nationally in the Inc. 5000 and locally in the Northeast Ohio area by the Weatherhead 100. We also have a number of accreditations as PTC Certified Windchill Implementer and Certified Training Partner and Service Provider. Like I said, we don't just work with PTC as a partner. We also work with several other companies that offer sort of complementary solutions that fit into some areas where PTC doesn't have an offering. So we have some higher level simulation and optimization software from Solid Thinking and Noesis, as well as Autodesk. And we work with eTraj, who is a PTC partner, to develop custom applications for customers that sort of work with Creo and Windchill. So if you like the idea of everything that we're talking about in today's presentation, but you don't know that you have the bandwidth internally to ramp somebody up on these tools, we have partners that can build custom applications for you. If you have additional questions or you need any additional information after the webinar, if there are technical questions, you can contact me. My email address is up there. And if you have sales questions, you can email sales@boundarysys.com, and that will get directed to the correct account manager for your area. And I will put this slide back up again at the end, so if you don't have these written down yet, you'll have another chance at the end of the presentation. So when we talk about Creo customization, basically the goal is that you want to automate some sort of time-consuming task, or you want to add additional functionality that isn't available in Creo out of the box. And so some of the common things that I've seen customers want to do with the Creo customization capabilities is to automate some of the modeling tasks. They may have, common geometry that it takes quite a while to build, but it's generally just driven by geometric or parametric constraints, and so they can build an application that works with Creo to simplify that process, where they just have to enter the inputs, and it can go in the background and actually create the features and generate the geometry and possibly generate drawings for them. And then you can also extend the user interface to provide custom dialog boxes so that you have sort of an intuitive way to enter that information. But the general idea, again, is to sort of automate complex or time-consuming or difficult tasks so that the users aren't having to do that repetitively, and you're ultimately saving yourself a lot of time and effort. And then those things can be run either on demand, they can be scheduled, they can be driven by icons. Sometimes they can even run in the background without any user interaction. So there's a lot of different reasons that people want to do customization within Creo, and there are a number of tools that can be used to do that. Prior to the Creo 1.0 release, there were 4 basic APIs that were available in Creo. There was JLink, WebLink, Visual Basic API, and Pro Toolkit. And we'll talk about each of those in a little more detail in a second, just to give you some background on sort of what development tools have been available in the past and what has been added in the newer APIs. With Creo 1.0, all of those existing APIs remained, although they did rename Pro Toolkit to Creo Parametric Toolkit. And they added one additional API, which is the Creo Object Toolkit, which was based on C++ was the language. It was not included in the name at that point because there was only one of them. And then with Creo 3.0, they added 2 additional ones. So Creo Object Toolkit became Object Toolkit C++. They added Creo Object Toolkit Java, which again is our focus today. And they added the Creo User Interface Editor. And so again, they've been gradually adding additional capabilities. And again, we want to give you a little more background on what was capable in the sort of older APIs and why have they added these new ones. Now, one of the things to keep in mind in terms of customizing Creo is in order to do customization of Creo, you're going to need to have an existing knowledge of the programming language that you're using to do the customization. What language that is going to depend on the various APIs that we'll talk about. You'll need to have a knowledge of Creo to know what it is you're trying to automate within Creo, and then you will need to have any appropriate licensing if necessary. And again, that's going to be dependent on the specific API. So historically, Pro Toolkit, now PTC Creo Parametric Toolkit, has been the primary customization and automation tool in Pro Engineer and in Creo. It's a C library programming interface that provides over 5,000 functions or access to over 5,000 functions within Creo. So it's very powerful. It gives you a lot of control and a lot of capabilities to go in and really build some complex customizations and applications that will work within Creo and with your Creo data. This is a licensed product, and so it requires a PTC Creo Parametric Toolkit development license in order to actually write the applications, to actually do the development of the custom application. But then there is no runtime license. So once you've developed that, then you can roll it out to as many users as you want, and they don't need to have access to any type of special licensing in order to utilize that functionality. Now I'm going to give you a couple of examples here. There are a lot of ways that people have used Pro Toolkit and PTC Creo Parametric Toolkit to develop their own sort of custom in-house applications to work within Creo. I'm going to give you a couple examples here where sort of the functionality was developed and became so advanced that PTC actually purchased it and embedded it within it's sort of as its own Creo module. And one of those is something called Expert Mold Base Extension. And so one of the ways that Toolkit can be used is to, again, automate repetitive modeling tasks. And so, in the development of a mold base, we're always building very similar geometry, plates with certain types of holes and things like that. And so Expert Mold Base Extension adds a new sort of 2D user interface that you can see on the right that allows you to sort of lay that all out in 2D very quickly, define some parameters and some general information, and then it will automate the creation of all of the actual parts and features and geometry that it needs based on that. And then beyond, that model creation and the geometry creation, it can even create drawings of that in the background. There's a number of different, ways you can use all of those capabilities. Again, this is an example where, that functionality grew to the point where, it's now an actual module that's available from PTC. Another example of that uses sort of a different set of toolkit capabilities is PTC Model Check. Again, this was initially developed as its own sort of standalone add-on to ProEngineer by another company that leveraged toolkit functionality to sort of monitor the user session and what the user was doing within Creo and how they were interacting with the model in order to enforce company standards, verify that modeling best practices were not being violated, and provide tools for actually correcting any of those things if there were any issues or if repairs needed to be made. And again, it's a product that sort of matured to the point where PTC actually bought that, embedded it within Creo, and now Model Check is included within every seat of Creo Parametric. So again, those are two examples. A lot of other examples, again, that customers have developed in-house and just maintained as their own sort of specific applications, based on the type of functionality that they need. I know there are tire manufacturers where, once you generate the tire, there's very complex things that have to be done to generate the tooling from that tire model. And so a lot of times they'll use toolkit functionality to automate that. It's very complex. It's hard for a user to do, but you're sort of doing the same thing every time. So it's a perfect example of a case where you can use this type of functionality. Like I said, Toolkit was sort of the primary API within Creo prior to the Creo 1.0 release, but there were several others. These were referred to as the PFC APIs, and the three other APIs were JLink, which was Java, WebLink, which was JavaScript, and the VB API, which was Visual Basic. And all of these were actually included with your Creo Parametric license. There wasn't additional development or runtime licensing required. However, they also offered limited functionality, so you really couldn't do nearly as much with these APIs as you could with the full Toolkit API. Now, they were interoperable with the Toolkit API, which would allow you to build more complex applications. But in order to utilize that, now you have to purchase Toolkit, and Toolkit is C. So if you want to develop in Java, you can do some of that in JLink, but then to really make it an advanced application, you're going to need to start using Toolkit, and you're into another language. So with the Creo 1.0 release, PTC basically unveiled an entirely new product strategy around their Creo products. So the naming change coincided with a new direction in terms of strategy. And some of the key points there were, instead of having one giant monolithic piece of software, which was ProEngineer, they were going to go to a suite of apps that provided different types of functionality. And so, the core app is, PTC Creo Parametric, which is sort of the continuation of ProEngineer with parametric modeling and assemblies and drawings and all of those things. But then there are other apps that will support additional creation paradigms, like Creo Direct is a direct modeler as opposed to a parametric modeler. Creo Simulate is sort of a standalone simulation app. Creo Schematics allows you to do 2D wiring diagrams and piping diagrams and things like that. And all of these have a common user experience, and they work on a common data model. So you can work with your Creo parametric data in Creo Direct and pass that back and forth seamlessly. And so that's sort of the new direction. And some of the goals of this is for openness and sort of expandability, and that is the ability for PTC to continue developing additional applications within the Creo suite that give you additional functionality. And we've seen that Creo 1.0 had 4 or 5 apps, and 2.0 added a few more, and 3.0 added a few more, but also to allow for third-party application development, where you can external companies beyond PTC will be able to go in and sort of develop their own apps that will work with the other Creo apps, have a common user experience, and again, sort of work on that common data model. So this is a really big deal. It's a change of direction, and it's really sort of changing the thought process about how you would develop new apps and how you would develop custom functionality for the existing apps. And so along with that new Creo strategy, we also needed a new API strategy, and some of the key drivers for that are, a rich API so that partners will be able to develop those new Creo apps. Again, that's one of the key things, is this idea we can add on as many apps as we want, sort of under the Creo umbrella, provide a rich API so people can do that, and also to support customization across all of the PTC Creo apps. So, not just customization for Creo Parametric, but Creo Direct and Creo Layout and Creo Schematics. And also just modernization of the technology. Creo Toolkit has been around for a long time. It's getting kind of old. It's not necessarily the most efficient. So we want to modernize that, and we want to, hopefully provide multiple bindings for the APIs, to not limit you to, having to use the C programming language if you want to do really advanced customization, but provide multiple options. So PTC, starting with Creo 1.0, introduced some of these additional APIs. And so in Creo 1.0 and also 2.0, PTC introduced the Creo Object Toolkit. At the time, that's all it was called. And that was C++ was the language that it used. And the idea was that it provided, at the time, most of the functionality of the old Toolkit application, or the old Toolkit API. Not necessarily all of it yet, but that is the goal, is to make this a very powerful tool. And then in Creo 3.0, they added the Creo Object Toolkit Java API, as well as the new Creo User Interface Editor. And all three of those new APIs, Object Toolkit C++, Object Toolkit Java, and the UI Editor, starting with 3.0, are now also available for Creo Direct. So again, starting to expand from just allowing you to customize Creo Parametric, which is what the PTC Creo Parametric Toolkit allows you to do, but also now customize Creo Direct, and with future Creo releases, continuing to expand that into the other Creo apps. And you can see on the right sort of a screenshot of the new Creo UI Editor. So again, it gives you a graphical user interface for developing dialog boxes and menus and things like that that are going to give you access to your custom functionality. And so it gives you a way of sort of building those easily, and then also sort of standardizing them across any custom applications that you've developed and across applications for multiple Creo apps. So why Object Toolkit Java? So again, that's sort of the main focus of today's webinar, although we're giving you a lot of background information as well. Well, many customers want to customize in Java. Not everybody uses C, and so if you want to program in something else or customize in something else, a lot of people want to use Java. The option to do Java customizations in the past was JLink, which was very limited. Like we said, that wasn't a licensed product. and its functionality was quite limited, and it primarily only provided read capability to the models. It didn't give you a lot of capabilities to actually create and modify geometry with that. And so Object Toolkit Java addresses that gap. It provides access to the full functionality that is available in Object Toolkit C++. So both of the Object Toolkit APIs provide, comparable functionality, just with different languages, C++ versus Java. Unlike JLink, it's not just read APIs. It gives you APIs to change model contents, to create features, to do all sorts of functionality that just wasn't possible with JLink. So again, that's really a key point, is this is now a fully capable development tool that gives you access to really do a lot of the same types of things that you could do with Pro Toolkit previously. Now, unlike JLink, because this is providing a lot more capabilities, Object Toolkit Java is a licensed product, and we'll get to more information about the exact licensing in a second here. So what are some of the key capabilities within Object Toolkit Java? UI customization. So you can customize the Creo user interface, create new dialog box, add commands to the ribbon, add commands to pop-up menus. And again, you even have the new UI editor tool that gives you sort of an easier way to do a lot of those things. You can monitor the Creo session, you can interact with windows, and you can manipulate models. So again, you can create and modify geometry, you can work with parts and assemblies and drawings, you can interact with wind chill. So again, a lot of the things that in the past you've been able to do with the traditional Toolkit API, you can now do with Creo Object Toolkit Java. The licensing, I mentioned that Object Toolkit Java is a licensed product. A couple of the goals in terms of how to structure that licensing were to keep this affordable for small and medium-sized businesses, and also to provide an upgrade path to JLink users who needed more advanced functionality. And so one of the ways that they did this was to license it as both a development license and a runtime license. The benefit of that is that the development license is at a much lower cost than the Creo Parametric Toolkit license. So the old Creo Parametric Toolkit license, I think, is over $20,000 for a seat, maybe around 22, something like that. So it's very expensive, and that's great if you're a large company and you only need a couple of those seats, and then you're going to roll it out to 1,000 users, and you don't have to have runtime licensing. That works out pretty well. If you only have 10 users, that's not quite as good of a deal. And so Toolkit Java is licensed with a development license that is less than half the cost of the traditional Toolkit license, and then the runtime license can be either locked or floating, and that's I think it's $1,300 a seat for the floating license, and maybe half of that or so for a locked version of that. So again, with this, you'd need a development license to actually develop the application, and then any users that are actually going to be utilizing it would need access to a runtime license in order to do that. But again, development license, a lot less expensive than the older Toolkit license. If you do already own the PTC Creo Parametric Toolkit license, you can buy the Toolkit Java development license as an extension to your existing Toolkit license, again at a significant discount. So I think it's half the price of the traditional Toolkit Java license to add that onto your Toolkit license. And again, the other new thing in Creo 3.0, along with the introduction of the Object Toolkit Java, is the introduction of the Creo user interface editor. And so again, this allows you to basically use a graphical user interface to lay out new dialog boxes and to add options into your menus and things like that. And it's actually included free with your PTC Creo Parametric Toolkit license. So if you have a toolkit license or Object Toolkit Java or Object Toolkit C++, this is included with that. And I can actually show you what this looks like here. So again, this is the new Creo UI editor. And so in here, I can go in and tell it I want to create a new sort of dialog box layout. And it gives me some existing templates to choose from, so I'm not starting from scratch every time. So maybe I want this one that gives me my apply, OK, or cancel options. It pops it into the grid here that sort of lays that out for me. And if I hit my preview button, I'm going to be able to see a quick preview of what that looks like so far. And in order to manipulate it, I can just tell it what elements I want to add in here. So maybe I want to add an option menu, and I want to add a checkbox, and I can preview it again to see. I can see the information that I have added in there. So again, it gives you a much quicker way to go in and develop these types of additions to the Creo interface that you want to use. Helps you to make sure that you're staying consistent with the look and feel. Helps you to maintain that same look and feel, across multiple Creo apps if you're doing some customization in Parametric and in Direct. And then the other great thing about this is once I have this laid out, I can just save my sort of template within the UI editor interface. I can also save the code, and it's going to give me the option right here to save that code either as C++ or Java, depending on which of the object toolkits I'm working with. So again, that's a nice option that they've added, again, to try to streamline everything, again, across multiple apps and across all of the different capabilities. So why use the Creo object toolkits at all? Sort of what's the benefit of, why is PTC moving from the older toolkit to the new object toolkits? Again, one of the big goals is to provide a common API that can be used across the different Creo apps. It's object-oriented and uses factory APIs, so the code is a lot more efficient. You can do the same things in a lot fewer lines of code than you would need in the older toolkit application. It also reduces the risk of improper use. And it's designed to minimize the effort of transition from Creo Parametric Toolkit to the Object Toolkit. So, if you have existing toolkit apps, you would like to migrate them over. The goal is to make that transition as seamless as possible. Now, if you do use the existing PTC Creo Parametric Toolkit, don't worry, that's not going away. They do plan to continue to add enhancements to that, both expansions of the existing functionality as well as up to any changes to the Creo data model. So if there's any changes to just how Creo does things, the toolkit API will update to reflect those. The PFC APIs, JLink, WebLink, and the VB API, those are going to continue to be supported as well. If you like doing customization in those, you can continue, but there are not plans to continue enhancements or updates on those. So they're not going to add additional functionality to that. The focus is going to be on enhancing the object toolkits, expanding functionality to cover everything that's already available in Creo Parametric Toolkit, additional functionality beyond that, and providing additional language bindings. They've already got C++ and Java. They could potentially add more language bindings beyond those in future releases of Creo. So again, that's sort of the idea is provide this common foundation and a modern set of tools for customization across all of your Creo apps moving forward, and try to make it sort of as accessible as possible to as many people. That's all we have for today's webinar. If you have questions, you can go ahead and send those to me now, or if you raise your hand, I can call on you and unmute you if you want to ask your question, or you can just type your question into the questions box. Otherwise, if you think of a question after we end the webinar, feel free to email it to me or to sales@boundarysys.com. And I also have a URL down at the bottom. If you go to boundarysys.com and search for Toolkit Java or just type in that link, it will take you to our information page on the Creo Object Toolkit Java. Okay. All right, we got a question. Pop this out so I can see it a little better. So the first question is, do the same limits apply to the VB API as to JLink? The answer to that is yes and no. There definitely are similar limits to the VB API. It's not going to be nearly as powerful as either Toolkit or any of the Java object toolkits, but I don't think it's exactly the same list of limitations. I actually have here we go. I actually have another presentation handy. So the Java API, again, gives you some basic access, Windchill server access, data exchange, limited interface customization, and applications triggered by events occurring in your Creo parametric session. And the Visual Basic provides, I think, more part assembly and drawing manipulation capabilities than JLink, but maybe less capabilities in other areas. So yeah, they both have similar limitations, but they're not exactly the same. Any other questions so far? Next question was, does Boundary Systems do training with these APIs? Yes, we can do training with the APIs. Typically there is not a lot of demand for them in order to run sort of scheduled classes. So we're more likely to do it as sort of custom mentoring on site, both because of the level of demand and also just the types of things people are looking to do. It tends to be more custom to their environment. But yeah, if you do have an interest in learning how to use some of these, feel free to reach out to sales@boundarysys.com. Next question was, will JLink still work with Creo 3.0, or do you need a license? Now, that's an excellent question. And yeah, all of the existing APIs pre-Creo all will still work with Creo 3.0 in the same way they have in the past. So JLink, WebLink, and VB API, those all are still available. They are options in the installer. When you hit Customize in the Creo installer, you can select any of those, and in order to install them, you can still use them. They still require no additional licensing. The traditional Creo Parametric Toolkit is also still available. That does require the same licensing that it has in the past. And then they've just added new stuff. So at this point, they haven't removed any of the existing capabilities or added any requirements that weren't there previously. All right, any other questions? All right. Well, thank you to everyone for taking the time to join us today. Like I said, if you do have questions, feel free to shoot me an email and let me know. We will look forward to seeing you all on another webinar in the future.